poop, and they poop a lot. And there are some species of penguins that utilize their poop to build their nests in. Those are the banded penguins. So the Humboldt penguins and the African penguins are the two most common examples of the banded penguins that utilize guano nests. Guano is their poop, and they're basically pooping so much that over time those layers really build up. And so penguins will then burrow down into that layer and make kind of a little nest in there, and that's where they lay their eggs. So the guano is important because these two types of penguins live in warmer climates, and those warmer temperatures really are going to impact the nest quality and those eggs. So if those eggs are just out in the hot sun without that layer of protection, they're not going to be viable, they're not going to last. What has happened is over time people figured out that guano makes an excellent fertilizer. So people started going to these nesting grounds and taking some of the guano back and selling it as fertilizer. It actually boomed into this big business to the point where people were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. We're gonna call it the white gold. And it really was a profitable business. So people bought and sold this guano, and then of course didn't really think about the impacts it would have on penguins. This issue of guano harvesting is something that absolutely would impact penguins. It's something that without their guano, they're gonna have a really hard time surviving. A lot of the penguins have switched what they're doing with their nests. They have been burrowing in just the rocks and the dirt, and they have been just laying them on bare ground. There are some like crevices in the rocky coast that they also will kind of climb into and lay their eggs in there as well. But again, it's just not as viable as their original guano nests that they can build.
I'm David Shutt. I'm the Executive Director of Penguins International, and we are a global penguin conservation nonprofit organization. Because of COVID, we haven't been able to travel, and that's been really hard. And so 2 seasons we couldn't do anything travel-wise. But we've also been able to build up some collaborations with some of the other nonprofit penguin conservation organizations around the world. So the biggest one is Punta San Juan in Peru. And they've got a very large Humboldt penguin colony there that is in danger because of guano harvesting. The Humboldt penguins are a threatened species of penguin, and for the last 100 years, the locals have been harvesting the guano in the area. All of that guano harvesting has taken away the substrate that they can actually build their burrows in. And so we've been working with them not only to help them build new artificial nest boxes that the Humboldt penguins can live in until the guano is reestablished in that area, but we've also been able to help them build new buildings for their research. We worked with an engineer to build some new nest boxes that were inexpensive to build and could be done by the locals on site there for very little money. Ultimately, when the artificial nest boxes are no longer needed, when there is an adequate depth of guano that they can actually burrow into and have a successful nest, that's what we want to see. And that's going to take a few years. None of this stuff happens fast, that's for sure.
Now with South America, it's a little bit different. This guano harvesting has gone all the way back to Inca times. So there's a lot more cultural ties into guano harvesting. And instead of stopping it completely like they did in South Africa, they continue it. It's just managed and happens once every 5 to 7 years. So they really have been doing a lot to keep the culture alive, to work with local farmers and local people, but also to measure how much guano, what areas it can be extracted from to keep the penguins protected.
Without being able to partner with the government and allowing them to still harvest the guano, then they're not gonna want us to go, they're less concerned about sustainability. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. They need those economic benefits. And at some point in time, tourism will become that economic benefit, but they do have this natural resource in the guano. And as long as it can be done sustainably, then that's great.
Penguins matter more than we, I think, realize. They truly represent ocean health. And when we know how our ocean is doing, it really impacts how our planet is doing. They are a mesopredator. They're in the middle of that food web, so they're kind of keeping fish populations in balance, and they're also prey to bigger apex predators, things like sharks, things like seals and sea lions. And when we take away penguins, seals and sea lions and sharks that are a normal part of their system are gonna have to start finding other food sources to make up for that loss of penguins. Those other populations are gonna get even larger without a predator eating them. So it's just gonna really mess up the food web, and then eventually that does impact us, because all food webs are connected, and if we're like taking things away out of this balanced system, we're basically pulling the last piece out of a Jenga game, and it's just gonna collapse. I think we can easily take action to help penguins by looking at the seafood that we eat. So a lot of penguins eat fish. We also like to eat fish. And there are a lot of interconnections with that, making sure we're using sustainably harvested fish. And I know the Monterey Bay Aquarium has a wonderful website where you can look up what state you're in and see where the fish are. If it's a type of fish you should maybe avoid, or a fish that you should eat. A lot of interconnected pieces, but I really do feel like we as individuals can make such an impact by watching our consumption of not only fish, but stuff in general. I think Humboldt penguins are going to be saved by people. I think we really know a lot more about them than we did 10, 20 years ago.